Intro. Foundation by Isaac Asimov is one of the cornerstones of modern sci-fi, almost as influential, if not more so, than Dune. It single-handedly created the idea of the Galactic Empire, adding inspiration to the Imperium of Dune, and certainly inspiring the Galactic Empire from our favorite space opera, Star Wars. Its psychohistory certainly played a part in Paul's prescience, a gain from Dune. And I think it likely also influenced the Force, mainly the visions experienced by the Jedi. It is also my guess that the capital planet of the Galactic Empire and Foundation, Trantor, played a part in the design of the capital planet of the Galactic Empire and the Galactic Republic in Star Wars. One which I think you will be familiar with, to some extent, Coruscant. It's the first book to have been released in the 7-book series. Although it's not the first book chronologically, that honor goes to Prelude to Foundation, which I haven't read yet, but I own, so I might summarize it eventually. There's also a mini-series about it on Apple TV Plus that covers what this summary will cover and a little bit after that. So now with this prelude out of the way, let's get on to our summary. First, exposition. In this universe, the people use hyperspace, a term which we are all familiar with since George Lucas launched it into pop culture, to travel the galaxy in the blink of an eye. Psychohistory is a science where the user looks into the future using magic, basically. Meet our protagonist, Gal Dornick, a country boy who has never seen Trantor before. He lives on Synax and has a PhD in mathematics. Going on a journey, the culmination of his young years, the journey has been to the capital planet of Trantor. He's going since he has been invited by the great Harry Seldon. Harry Seldon is the man responsible for the Foundation, the man who took the science of psychohistory from a well-known fringe subject to a full-blown science, to join the Seldon Project. That becomes the Foundation in a bit later. Then Gal goes to the viewing room to get the first sight of Trantor. He gets to see the star that Trantor orbits before a guard approaches him. They have a conversation about how he can't stay in the viewing room since he'd both be burned by radiation and blinded at the same time. Gal feels disappointed. He can't help it even though he thinks it's childish. He couldn't expect it to take longer. So this chapter starts with the ship landing and Gal getting out. You could also pronounce the name Gale. I don't know. People pronounce it different ways. One thing about the summary, I'm skipping over tons of little details for the sake of my sanity and not plagiarizing the whole book. Asimov also had a ton of great ideas, not well conveyed without using his words. As an example, the 3 laws of robotics, which I'll cover when I do iRobot. And a ton of other scientific ideas that I won't dive into, since it's a lot of how specific things work, and that makes really, really boring. TLDR, read the book. Then Gale goes through what amounts to customs, basically, but like on the inside of the ship. Think flying to Vancouver and Toronto and having to get your bag searched and having your passport checked while still on the plane. I guess it's because he's traveling like interplanetary and they don't really want to waste time afterwards. When he steps off the ship, he sits in awe of Trantor. He then wonders how long it will take him not just to get used to the ever so slightly increased gravity, but the immensity of everything on this planet. De-embarkation building for a bit, imagining clouds forming beneath its huge mass. So then, basically, a customs agent asks Gal to move along. He does that and tells him that taxis are to the 3rd door on the left. Gal follows that guy's instruction and comes to a sign saying taxis to all points. A hooded figure follows Gal down this hall and heard his destination. Gal is staying at a desk titled Supervisor. He and the supervisor have a conversation. The supervisor wants to know where he's going. Gal says good hotel. It's not very specific. He just wants to go to the closest one. And the supervisor gives him a ticket that will glow if he's pointing in the right direction, which seems kind of stupid and more like a Minecraft item that would be added in like a modded hotel world or something than like a modded Minecraft compass. It seems closer to that than an actual efficient mode of like finding stuff for a future society. But anyway, he does that. Gal starts walking through a shockingly massive crowd of people and ends his path at a taxi. The The taxi driver asks if he's going to Luxor, and Gal says yes. The person who followed Gal also hears this and watches Gal enter the vehicle. Then Gal wonders at the size of everything on Trantor. I like to envision Trantor like Coruscant, this part being the lower levels. It goes through a tunnel out at the Luxor Hotel. He gets out and tips the driver and heads to the hotel. In all this, from the moment of debarkation, there had been no glimpse of sky. This chapter starts with a log of the structure of the capital world city Trantor. It says that the entire planet is one big city, and that at its height, its population was more than 40 billion. And that the population was so huge, it was almost entirely composed of bureaucrats working to make the empire function, but it was still too small since the entire population is bureaucrats. So they had to import food from 20 agricultural worlds brought by a massive fleet of ships daily, making it very, very easy to siege because it has no food production abilities. It's almost like if an entire country had that. Oh, hey, Angola, how are you doing? Ending with a note that as revolts became more common and the emperors did a little more than, quote, the protection of Trantor's delicate jugular vein. This chapter starts with a quote from the Encyclopedia Galactica explaining psychohistory. Basically, Harry Seldon, the guy Gal is on Trantor to meet, created psychohistory by using non-mathematical concepts to predict the actions of large groups of people. That seems a little, far-fetched for supposedly just math magic. For example, if I went up to him and asked, hey, will I get an A on my math test? He couldn't give me an answer unless he knew that I sucked at math, in which case he could tell me I will get an F. I'll fail the test. But if he didn't know that, he couldn't give me an answer. But if I asked, will the USA fall? He could give me an answer. Now on to the rest of the chapter. So Gale is speaking with Harry Seldon outside of his thing and says, hello. They introduce themselves. Harry says that that Gal was expecting them to meet at least on tomorrow. But they had to rush it since it's getting harder to find new recruits and they need his services now. Gale doesn't understand. But it turns out the guy on the tower, Gerald or Jarl, I might be changing his names a couple of times. He was an agent of the Public Safety Office, which is basically the police. He was also the guy who was following him at the spaceport. One quick note on this chapter, namely this dialogue, it's a super sterile sounding English. For example, one of the lines is, "But why? I am afraid I am very confused." Which, sounds very 1950s and, it's written and they didn't have a grasp on how to write dialogue. But, whatever. That's from Gale. Now back onto the summary. Gale doesn't understand. And Seldon asks if Gerald had told him anything about him. Gale remembers that he called him the Raven Seldon, and that he told him that he predicted disaster. Then turns out you have to apply psychohistory to everything. And that's what Gale's gonna end up doing by the end of his time with Harry. Harry takes out a calculator and shows Gale what happened to the Empire, and specifically Trantor. He shows Gale the ruins of Trantor through math. Just 3 centuries from the present. It's not described at all, but I would probably, if you took Coruscant and let the Vandals, which was the tribe that sacked Rome so hard that it's why we have the word vandalism loose on it for a couple of years. He ends by asking Gale what the probability of Trantor will be destroyed in 3 centuries. Gale doesn't have a calculator, so he has to do the calculation in his head. He says around 85%. The actual number is 92.5%. So that's why he's called the Raven Selden, but Gale doesn't understand why this isn't in the newspaper, which, like, you wouldn't think there would be newspapers 50,000 years in the future. Like, we don't even have them now. Well, we have them, but nobody really reads the newspaper except for old people. But, like, Selden assures him that, you know, that's not that odd because they don't want the stinky peasants to know about it. Otherwise, that'd be bad and the Empire would collapse even faster. Gale's being investigated. Everyone's being investigated now. And turns out there's a 1.7% chance that, like, Harry will be executed, like, by the start of the project. That wouldn't stop the project, though, for some reason. And that they're going to meet at the university tomorrow. "I will," said Gale. This chapter starts with a quote from the Encyclopedia Galactica, explaining that the aristocracy rose after Emperor Cleon I was assassinated. It says that the last strong emperor was Cleon II, and that the start of the fall of the Empire was with the trial of Harry Selden, and that it is described in Harry Selden's biography, written by Gale. So, Gale didn't do quite what he promised Harry. He didn't meet up with him at the university. You know, a little annoying, but he has a good reason. It's because he was detained by the Commission of Public Safety. They take him in and ask a question. Very politely, like incredibly polite. Like, the guy has a very nice tone while talking to him. And he explains he signed up for a job with Harry Selden after getting his degree in math. Finally, the interviewer asks, "When will Trantor be destroyed?" Gale answers he doesn't know. Then the interviewer asks Gale if he knows anything else. Also, they've been following the whole time after everything. Shocking, I know, right? Finally, Gale is put to trial and calls for his right to a lawyer. Then it cuts to a tall man entering the room. Gale feels stressed since all this has happened in less than 30 hours. The tall man is named Lord Avakim, and he was sent by Harry Selden. From this point forward, called Selden, Harry the Raven, or Dr. Selden. Gale says he wants an audience with the Emperor since he's been held without reason. He also insists that he's innocent, but the lawyer explains that the Empire is listening in on their conversation, even though it's illegal, but he has a recorder that makes the legal recorder the Empire has not work. So now the Empire can't hear their conversation. Gale says he wants his audience with the Emperor. The lawyer responds it's not how things work on Trantor. They also talk about how the Emperor is from a noble aristocratic family. They then talk about psychohistory. Gale asks what the figures are for the success of the project and his own survival, along with the Raven. 99.9% for the project, and 77.2% for Gale not dying. Also, Harry's been detained. Then a guard walks in and ends the interview. "I forgot to write a quote down for the end of this chapter." Oh, it's loud. This chapter does not start with a quote from the Encyclopedia Galactica. Instead, it launches you right into the trial of Gale and Dr. Selden. So most of the trial is asking questions to the Raven, with little tiny baby questions being asked to Gale every once in a while. Also, there isn't an audience, and the press isn't allowed in the room, which makes sense because they're trying not to alarm the everyday folk. So the prosecution is grilling Dr. Selden on how many people are in his group. About 50 mathematicians and about 98,572 people in total. Then the prosecution asks what he thinks will happen to Trantor. He says that Trantor will be in ruins for 300 years, which we know is correct because he used math magic to do this. Just to clarify, I don't think math is magic. It's treated as magic in the story. Then they talk to if his statement is scientific, like they want a scientific truth, because they want to make sure that he isn't, because if it isn't, then he's just being disloyal and he could be killed for that, because remember, absolute space monarchy. Then he asks if Selden can prove it to the commission, but he can only explain it to another mathematician. The commission thinks he might be doing this to cause unrest for personal gains. The prosecution then asks what his purpose is, since he has a few people and little time to stop Trantor from falling. He says that it is to shorten the Dark Age following the fall of the Galactic Empire. Now, bearing everyone thinks he is a traitor, before a judge says that the Empire has stood for 12,000 years and has good wishes for a quadrillion humans. Selden responds to that, saying that trade will end and wars will be endless, and that, yes, another state will rise, but only after 30,000 years, with 1,000 generations of human suffering. Which seems like a lot. Like, you wouldn't necessarily, like, this isn't the Roman Empire, but whatever. This is just basically long space Rome. The prosecution thinks he's contradicting himself and saying they can stop Trantor from falling. But Selden says, with his people writing the Encyclopedia Galactica, he can shorten the Dark Age to 1,000 years. I also forgot to write a quote for this chapter because I am very big-brained. So the hearing ends and Harry and Gal are separated. Nothing else happens that night. The next day, they're seated super close to the judges, and it's just them. They're offered cigars. Harry accepts. Gal refuses. Don't smoke, it's bad for your lungs. Avakim isn't there, so apparently the judges were so convinced by Harry's argument yesterday that they aren't conducting a trial anymore. They are instead talking about the security of the state. He isn't called a regent, but is described like one. So the basically regent, Lin Chen, stands and speaks to Harry about why they should care about something 300 years away. They'll be dead in 100. Just like those damn boomers with climate change. I swear I've heard my grandparents say that like 1,000,000 times, that climate change will happen in 300 years and blah blah blah. Harry responds that a week ago the chances the judges would be living in by year's end was 1 in 10, but now it's 1 in 10,000 because the word of his interrupted trial will spread and cause Trantor to fall faster. Chen asks Harry what the difference between working on Trantor and a far-off planet would do. The thing is, Trantor is a massive library and massive university, but a secluded planet will make the men remember. This was written in the 50s, who will write the Encyclopedia Galactica, focus single-mindedly on their work. So now Harry can choose between exile and death, since he'd be killed if he doesn't go. But we can't all tell what he's going to choose. He will be given a secluded planet as long as he doesn't disturb the peace. Selden chooses exile and asks to switch planet. Chen responds with Terminus, and they are sent on their way. Gale's heart skipped a beat at the words. For the most part, he was filled with a tremendous joy, for who would not be, to escape death. Yet, in his vast relief, he found space for a little regret that Selden had been defeated. On the taxi ride to the university, Gal asks Harry if he was lying to the commission. He responds that the politicians of today must have an underlying understanding of the truths of psychohistory. That was a hard sentence to say. There are soldiers at the university. One of the soldiers informs them that they have been given 6 months to prepare for the move to Terminus and set their affairs in order. Then they quietly move to Harry's office. Harry's office is spy-proof, giving spy beams, which is that type of recorder that they used in the scene with Avakim, when it was just Gale and Avakim and he had to put the special thing. So that's them. So it gives spy beams, not silence because that's suspicious, nor static because that's also suspicious, but a randomly generated conversation. Harry says that this was all according to his plan. He grabs something from a fingerprint scanner drawer, like one that's locked with a fingerprint scanner, which is, it's weird to think that was sci-fi only 80 years ago, and now we have what amounts to randomly generated conversations. If you want, you can just go on and basically give me you can go onto a website and probably have a conversation, like just a randomly generated one you can use. And also, fingerprint scanners are so small that they fit into a cell phone, like one that doesn't even have a home button now. So, it's kind of weird to think that it was sci-fi only 80 years ago, since now we have them everywhere. What he grabs is a slide, which is something that no one has used for a million years at this point. And it turns out that Harry has been preparing for 2.5 years for them to be exiled. And Harry will die in a year or two. So that kind of shocks Gal a little bit. I am finished. So this bit of the book, like the bit that has been covered in this 20-minute long summary at this point, is just the first of 5 bits. Like, there are 5 bits. It's called the Psychohistorians. This is the shortest one. I intend to do some more of these, and generally I think this is a really good book, and it's totally worth reading. This thing, you could probably, like, this section, these 8 chapters, you could probably read in, like, maybe 3 days or something if you really tried, because it's not a very hard book to read. But the thing is, it is written in a very sterile English. It's really good, and it's got some great ideas, and it's worth just reading it. Just if I don't think there are any check out your library if you can find one. At least where I live, there isn't one in the library, so that kind of sucks. It's only about the length of War of the Worlds, which is a really great one that I intend to cover eventually, but I need to reread it to take notes on it. I'm gonna try to release something about maybe the Divine Comedy soon, which that will be really, really long. So let's try to get that done. Woo! This is a summary done. It's great. It starts with an earthquake, burning 6, an aeroplane, and landing. Bruce is not afraid. Eyes of hurricane. Listen to your soul churn. World saves its own needs, and don't misserve your own needs. Speeds it up a notch. Greets. Got no strength. The ladder starts to clatter with fear. Height down height. Wire to fire, representing 7 games in government to hire a combat site. Left of west and coming to a hurry with the furs breathing down your neck. By the time reporters baffled Trump tethered crop. Look at that low plane. Fine then. Overflow population, common food. But it'll do. Save yourself. Serve yourself. World serves its own need. Listen to your heart bleed. Tell me with the rapture to prevent in the right. You fire a lot of patriotic slam. Fight bright light. Feeling pretty psyched. It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. 6 o'clock TV hour, don't get caught in foreign tower, slash and burn, return. Listen to yourself churn, lock him in, uniform and book burning, bloodletting. Every movement escalate, automotive incinerate. Light a candle, light a votive. Step down, watch a heel, crush. This means no fear, cavalier. Renegade exterior clear, a tournament of lies. Offer me solutions, offer me alternatives, and I decline. It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. And I feel fine. I feel fine. It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. The other night, a trip to nice continental drift divide. Mountains sit in a line. Leonard Bernstein, Leonard Branch Lenny Bruce, Jester Bangs. Birthday party, cheesecake, jelly beans, boom. Biotic, patriotic slam, butt, neck, right. It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it, It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine.